Well, we find Jesus teaching and preaching. He's in an area called Bethany, which is just a few miles from Jerusalem. And then he decides to leave Bethany and head for Galilee. But before heading for Galilee, Jesus finds Philip, one whom he's met, and he asks Philip to follow him. So he's preaching in Bethany. He's about to head to Galilee. He remembers having met Philip earlier, and he goes to Philip and he says, "Philip, come with me. Philip, follow me." And the Gospel of John says that immediately Philip followed Jesus. And after committing himself to Jesus, Philip does something interesting. He goes and finds his dear friend Nathanael, and he tells Nathanael that he has found the Messiah. "We found him, Nathanael. He's the one. He's the one about whom Moses wrote. He's the one about whom the prophets spoke. He's the one mentioned in the law. We have found the Messiah. Come, Nathanael." And Nathanael has heard all this spiritual hearsay about the town of Nazareth, this hole-in-the-wall town that evidently nothing good can come from. And so Nathanael responds, "Oh, Philip, can anything good come out of that little town, Nazareth?" And Philip speaks the most inviting words one could possibly hear. "Come and see." Well, come and see, Nathanael. You wonder about Jesus? Come and see. I want us this morning to come and see again. I want us to come and see who this Jesus is. I want us to hear again the qualities of His life that lift Him up as the center of our faith. And I also want us to recommit ourselves to Him. So this morning we're going to come and see Jesus anew. We're going to lift up the qualities of His life that define Him and hopefully recommit ourselves to Him. One of the real privileges that pastors have is to work with people on their journey of commitment to the Christian faith and to Jesus. And as you might imagine, we have the opportunity to work with people of all ages. And recently, several weeks ago, a college student contacted Mary Grow, our discipleship coordinator, and told Mary that she wanted to commit herself to the Christian faith. She's never done that. She's in college. She's never been baptized. She's never joined a church. And so I began to meet with this young lady several weeks ago, and we have met weekly for some time leading up to tomorrow. And I've given her extensive reading to do in the Christian faith, and in particular, extensive reading about Jesus. Because one of the things I said to this young lady is that you're not committing yourself to a doctrine called the Christian faith. You're committing yourself to a person named Jesus. And so once again, I've given her a lot of reading about Jesus. And just this past week, as we look to tomorrow's final session before she heads out to college and before she accepts the decision to be baptized, I gave her a lot of reading about Jesus. And when I gave her that reading, I said to her, I apologize that I'm giving you so much to read. You know what she said? Just last week. "It's the most important thing there is. Why wouldn't I invest myself in it?" I'm sorry I'm giving you all this reading about Jesus as you move toward baptism. It's the most important thing there is. Why wouldn't I be willing to invest myself in it? He is the most important person of our lives. And the invitation is for us to come and see, come and know, and commit. So let's talk about Jesus this morning. Let me share 4 insights. First of all, Jesus knew He needed God. Jesus knew that He needed time with God. Yes, He was the Son of God. Yes, He was the incarnation of God into human history, but Jesus was also a human being who understood that He needed time with God. He needed intimacy with God. He needed reflective time with God if He was going to become the person that God wanted Him to be. Yes, Son of God, but also a man who knew that if he did not spend time with God in prayer and reflection, he could not become the person that God was calling Jesus to be. That's why you read in Matthew 14 these words. After Jesus dismissed the disciples, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray, and when evening came, he was there alone. It's why you read in Mark 1, very early in the morning, while it was still quite dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. It's why you read in Luke, one of those days Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the whole night praying to God. Listen to me. If Jesus of Nazareth needed time with God, Richard Smith needs time with God, and you need time with God. If Jesus of Nazareth needed deeper intimacy with God in order to become the person he was called to be, so I need deeper intimacy with God, and you need deeper intimacy with God. The person Jesus invites us to understand that without time with God, we cannot be all that we're called to be. The second thing is, Jesus exuded joy and gratitude in life. Jesus exuded great joy and gratitude about life. One of my favorite paintings about Jesus is called The Laughing Jesus. I don't know if you've seen it or not. You know, most of the pictures we have about Jesus are rather reflective. They're somber, somewhat serene. And yet I just love this picture. You can go online and find it. There's several that are listed under The Laughing Jesus, but there's one in particular I just love. He is in full laughter mode. It is obvious that he is laughing about something joyous. I just love that because I think that's Jesus. And if you wonder about that, think about this. Why in the world would children gravitate to Jesus if he weren't a joyous person? I mean, you think about it for a moment. Have you ever known a child who would gravitate towards somebody who wasn't joyful? I mean, you want to gauge whether or not you consider yourself a joyful person or not, see how many children come your way. The clearest test of whether or not we are joyful people, thankful people, people of gratitude, who exude that kind of joy is whether or not children come our way. They came his way. They gravitated toward him. The disciples tried to push them away, and Jesus said, as we said this morning in the baptism service, oh, let them come to me. I love the children. Let them come to me. I stumbled inadvertently across an evangelical spiritual thinker and writer just a week or so ago, and her name is Ann Voskamp, V-O-S-K-A-M-P. I don't know if you know that name or you've read her new book or her book. It has sold 1 million copies. It is titled, 1,000 Gifts, A Dare to Live Fully Right Where You Are. 1,000 Gifts, A Dare to Live Fully Right Where You Are. Ann Voskamp is the wife of a farmer. They live in Canada. She has 6 children. They have 6 children. And she sort of accidentally stumbled on this journey of becoming a noted spiritual writer and speaker. And she tells about the occasion in that when this happened. She was at the hairdresser, she says, and she was sitting next to a woman who was reading a book titled 1,000 Places to See Before I Die. So get this picture in mind. Ann Voskamp is at the hairdresser. She happens to be next to a woman who has a book that she can see the title. And the title of the book is 1,000 Places to See Before I Die. And Ann Voskamp writes this. Is that it, I thought? Are there physical places that simply must be seen before I stop within time, before I inhale eternity? Isn't it here? Can't I find it here? As long as thanks is possible, then joy is always possible. The Holy Grail of joy is not some exotic location or some emotional experience, and I love that statement. The Holy Grail of joy is not some exotic location or some emotional mountaintop experience. The joy and wonder can be right here. The only place we need to see before we die is this place of seeing God right here and right now. How do you find joy in the midst of deadlines, debt, drama, seeing, and daily duties? You receive each day as a gift from God. And then she writes, so today I will breathe deep and be thankful. That's Jesus. every morning, breathe and be thankful. Breathe and take in the joy and wonder of life. The third thing is Jesus chose to be obedient. Jesus chose to be obedient. I read recently a comment by a TV evangelist that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to do so apologetically because I don't want to sound like I'm condemning this TV evangelist or his theology. But I will admit, and you don't have to agree with me, I have problems with what he said. Here's what he said. God is a strategic God. He has laid out an exact plan for all our lives down to the smallest details. God has it all figured out. He is not vague or approximate. God is orchestrating our lives down to the very second that He ordained before the foundation of the world. Today, be encouraged. Be encouraged because God orchestrates your life. So keep your faith and trust in Him. Now let me be clear, you don't have to agree with me. But I do not believe for one moment the God I know and whom I serve orchestrates my life or your life. I do not believe for one moment that every second of my life is dictated, mandated by God. I don't believe God is some divine chess master who is moving us around on the pieces of the board called life the way He wants without any of us having the freedom to respond. You know as well as I do that God gave every single one of us free will, right? And if God is orchestrating my life and God is orchestrating down to the millisecond, then you don't have the freedom that we think you do. I don't have the freedom I thought I do. And what this often leads to is the idea that Jesus' life was orchestrated. Theologically, some people believe, biblically, some people believe that God dictated Jesus' life, and that the reason Jesus was obedient is because God was orchestrating that obedience. And that really bothers me. Because I don't think for one moment that the reason Jesus was obedient to God was because God was mandating that obedience. And that Jesus was destined to be obedient no matter what. I mean, you think about it. Do you think God, every human being in the world, and I've said this, free will and not give it to His own Son? Can you believe for one moment that God is going to give you free will and me free will and not give Jesus free will? Which means that when Jesus was obedient because He chose to be obedient. Let me tell you why. Jesus chose to be obedient because He loved the Father. His obedience was an obedience of joy. It was an obedience of willingness. It was a sign of how much Jesus loved His Father. And I would invite you to that kind of obedience and me to that kind of obedience. To be obedient not because somebody mandates it, not because we're fearful, but because we love God. To be obedient simply because you love God. And finally this, Jesus preached and lived the centrality of love. And you know that. Jesus preached and lived the centrality of love. I mean, walk through the New Testament. Walk with Jesus through the New Testament and see all the times that He's building a bridge of love towards somebody that so often has been rejected or neglected. I mean, think about the occasions He was condemned by the religious authorities because He ate with whom? He ate with sinners, oh me, and publicans. Think about the woman at the well who had been married 5 times and was living with a man who was her husband and received the hand of grace of Jesus. Think about a glorious tax collector named Matthew, whom most would say didn't deserve time, and yet Jesus gave him time. The woman about to be stoned for adultery, and steps in and stops the stoning of that woman for adultery. Think about how often He challenged the religious authorities on their spiritual arrogance and their spiritual judgmentalism. That's our Jesus. I read an article clear. I read the overview article. I didn't read the article because this article is from the Journal of Neuroscience. And I can assure you that you won't find on my coffee table or in my office or in my classroom a Journal of Neuroscience. I applaud that. I applaud those who have that kind of intellect. But I did read an overview of the article from the Journal of Neuroscience just this past week. And it was talking about research that's been done in London on the brain. And this research says that the brain makes an instantaneous decision about whether somebody you meet is trustworthy or untrustworthy. Think about that. The moment you meet a person, says this research, the brain makes an immediate assessment about whether that person is trustworthy or untrustworthy. So you meet somebody, the brain decides right then and right there, tells you that that person is trustworthy or they're not trustworthy. With all due respect to science and to neuroscience and to research, let me tell you what Jesus would say. And you know it. Maybe the brain does that. The brain does tell you that the person you just met doesn't deserve your attention. Maybe your brain does tell you that to meet that person here is trustworthy. Maybe the brain tells you or tell me that the person we've just met is not our love and our care. Maybe the brain will tell me, avoid that person. Don't be involved with that person. But I'll tell you what Jesus would say again. He would say the heart defines our relationship with people. Of his to love everyone. And whatever seduces the brain you or me in that millisecond, Jesus would say, heart will tell you he or she is a child of God. Or reading or have read Charles Stanley's wonderful book called Christian, It's Not What You Think. And he sums up the truth of Jesus in these words. If we're disciples of Jesus, then no matter what he asks of us, the answer must be yes. If we're disciples of Jesus, then whatever he asks of us, the answer must be yes. The bottom line he gave us is to love one another. Jesus wanted his earliest followers and us to be a community of people defined by unconditional generosity and compassionate love. We're to love others in such a remarkable way that outsiders take notice. Loving others, he says, represents the marching orders of our lives. Kudos. Amen, brother. Right on, brother. It's Jesus, and that's our call. Others is the marching order of our lives. So I want you with me to come and see Jesus again. One who knew he needed God. Come one who approached each day with deep joy and gratitude. Come and see one who was obedient not because it was mandated, but because he loved God. And come and see the one who shows you and me how to love other people. Come and see Jesus, and may we follow him anew. Amen. I call your attention